We begin the current Daf Mesech the Sotah Daf Daled. Begin at the top line of the Yomid. We actually just started the Bryce on the previous Daf only because it explained the Mishnah that we had mentioned in the previous Daf to qualify this halach of how do we know that Tumah Be'er Echad is Neman only by the Sotah, but Tumah Be'er Echad is not Neman without Kinoi and Stira. And how do you know that Stira requires two Eidim and so does Kinoi? Do you know it from Ba or do you know it from Eres Dava? And we said that no, we know from Ba, which exclude you only have Be'er Echad by the Eidus of Tumah, but that of in general, when you don't have kinus stira, that you know because Erbes Davar it says Davar Davar. And then we're going to continue explaining this halacha of stira and what qualifies for stira itself for being secluded. Something to discuss in today's daf are the shiur of stira. Now, how long? What does it mean to be secluded? You have witnesses that she was secluded. How long is that? So that's actually kedei tumah, the amount of that they could have committed the act. And we have some Gemaras that if someone has a rayas that compares it to like eating bread without washing till yadayim, to like a person that has arrogance. We have many different agadic teachings at the end of the daf. The Gemara also discusses some important terms of concept, where we wash our hands before we eat, we wash our hands after we eat, but there are differences in halacha regarding lifting up your hands, lifting your hands down, depending what we really are doing with the water and what we're concerned for that water. So we begin the current daf dalam and aleph. So we had said there was this kinoi, this stira, and this tumah. Those are the three steps in the Sotah's process. Now, says the Brayso, become a shiur stira. How long is the measurement of, like you have two witnesses, let's say that she was secluded. For how long? A second? 10 minutes? How long do you have to say that they were secluded for? So it says the Brayso, it's kedei tumah. The amount of, long enough that she could become defiled. Now, what's the shiur of kedei tumah? Says the Brayso, it's kedei bia. The amount of that they could have had cohabitation, could have had intimacy. Now, how much is kedei bia? Oh, that's kedei hara. That's the amount of time that the male organ would be touching the genital area. That's however long that takes. That's the shiur of stira. Now, how much is that shiur? Which place brings from the Yerushalmi that all these shiurim are talking about after the belt has already been opened. So we're talking about once that's already been opened, how long does that take to commit that sin? So we have many different shiurim that we say. But the first one says, kedei akofas dekel, the amount of time that it takes for a person to go around a palm tree. Now later on the Gemara is going to explain why did we have to say all these things. When you wanted to tell me the shiur of stira, you had to tell me kedei tumah, kedei bia, kedei ra. And then you tell me kedei akofas dekel. What's all these extra, descriptions? Just tell me straight up. It's kedei akofas dekel. But that's the first opinion. The amount of time it takes to go around the palm tree, that's dibri b'shmal. Rabbi Elazar says a different shiur. He says no, it is kedei mezigas hakais. It's the amount of time it takes to mix or dilute. The way they used to do it, they would mix their wine with water to make it the right mixture, the right measurement. Now, how much is a kais? Rashi says generally when we talk about kais, we mean the revius of a loik. Now, later on, the Gemara is going to tell us that every one of these sages, why would they get up with this number that this is the amount of time of stira? They evaluated themselves. How long does it take them to do hara with their wives? And they said, okay, they came to give a shiur. So Rabbi side, the halacha of Sotah is how much is shiur stira? It takes this amount of time. And then they said in a very euphemism, they said in a very appropriate way, amount of time of diluting a cup of wine, amount of time it takes to go around a palm tree. He knew it takes him 5 seconds to do hara. And he went around the palm tree, he said it takes 5 seconds. The boy side, that's the shiur of stira, that's how they evaluate it. Rabbi Shloimy, he says, it's the amount of time of drinking that revius. Ben Azayim says, it's kedei lislis beya, it's the amount of time of roasting an egg. Kiva he says, it's kedei legoima, it's the amount of time it takes to swallow roasted egg. He says, that it's kedei l'gmor sholish beitzim duachazu. It's the amount of time that it takes to actually swallow 3 eggs one after the other. Rabbi Elazar ben Yirmiyam, he says kedei likshu gardi nima. It's the amount of time that it takes a weaver to tie a thread, to tie a string. Chanan ben Pinchas, this is interpretation number 7. This says actually 8, but it's really we're going to see is number 7. It's kedei shetoishad yodel techpia. It's the amount of time it takes for the woman to stick her hand into her mouth, little kisim, to take a splinter that's between her teeth. The eighth interpretation, Playmoyim, he says, it's Kadesh Teishud Yodel Asal. It's the amount of time it takes for her to stick her hand into the basket, little kicker, to take the loaf of bread. And he says, Ava B'Shein Raya, although there's not a complete proof l'dava for this thing, because the pasuk we're going to quote is not talking about sticking her hand into a basket, but there's a zeichel l'davar. There's some type of a allusion to this idea where we're comparing the woman who's being mezana to a loaf of bread, which, according to Plema, is it's the shiur, the amount of time it takes to take a loaf of bread from a basket, is the amount of time it takes for this nus to happen. Because the pasuk says in Mishlei, it says, ki bi ad isha zaina, because for a adulterous woman is ad kika lechem, up until a loaf of bread. So again, it's not really a real proof, but it's a zeichel. Though I mentioned this idea, how long does it take for a woman to become a zaina, is the amount of time it takes to take a loaf of bread from a basket. Okay. Now the Gemara says, wait a second. V'chol hani lamali. Why, when we started off describing this, did you have to mention, okay, first you told me what's the shiur stira, you told me it's the kedei tumah. And then you told me that that's kedei bia. And then you told me that's kedei hara. And then you told me, what your actual shiur is according to each time. Why don't you say straight? It's kedei tumah, it's kedei hakafas tekel. Says the Gemara, no, it's shrichi. We had to say all these terminologies. And the Gemara is going to go through this a little bit of a technical. Ditan, had we said that what's the shiur stira is kedei tumah, that's all I would have said. It's the amount of time to create tumah. Sahavimina, I would have said that actually the whole shiur that needs to bring to this, that is kedei tumasa v'artzusa. It's the amount of time that, what do you mean? A man and woman walk into a room. Don't think it's right away, the sin is committed. He has to seduce her. He has to have a shmooze, so she becomes okay with this. So I would have thought to say, when it says, how much the shiur stira, well, the wife went into the room with this man, when it says kedei tumah, I would have thought to me, the whole story, the time it takes for her to seduce and to defile her, and then tzat. Kamash Malan, that's what I had to tell you. What is tumah? It's kedei bia, meaning I only evaluate the amount of time it takes to have the act of cohabitation. Because like Rashi explained, you could say that he already appeased her before they were secluded. So they're already schmoozing in the bar, and then she was agreeable, and then they were secluded. So that's what I needed to say. It wasn't enough to just say only kedei tumah. I had to say kedei bia to say that it doesn't require all that time of appeasing. I just need the time of actual bia. Now, had I only said that the shiur of bia, I would have said, okay, it could take gemar bia, but I have to evaluate the amount of time it takes to finish up this whole act, which takes some time. No. It's kedei hara. Like the Gemara tells in Yavamas of Nadal Med Aleph, that hara, just the contact of the genital area, is like gemar bia for all arayos. So that's why I had to tell you kedei hara. Now, okay, that goes in order. But then, wait a second, why can't I skip some of the things? Why do I have to say all of them till there? Why not v'yesh min kedei hara? Why can't I just tell you, okay, how much is stira? Stira is the amount of time that you have just genital contact. And why do I have to say kedei tumah in the beginning? No. I would have said kedei hara v'artzaisa. I would have thought to say it's the amount of appeasing and then doing hara. Meaning, as Rashi explains, even had you said, meaning if you would have said kedei tumah and kedei hara, so I would have thought, okay, tumah is being defiled. How much is that hara? But that still requires, appeasing. And says Rashi that even had it said kedei bia kedei hara, I still would not have excluded the ritzui, the appeasing, because I would have said, hara is just coming to exclude that you don't have to do a full act of bia, but you still need to have, being meratzahar, because that's the way I would have understood it. I would have read the Bryce like this. How much is the shiur of stira? Says the Bryce kedei bia. But then I would have thought to say, you need to do the whole act of bia, which is, appeasing and finishing up the act. So then the Bryce is explaining, what's bia? No, just hara. But I still wouldn't exclude ritzui. So therefore I had to start off the Bryce like this. Kamash Malan, that's what I have to say, kedei tumah, which that sounds like we said, tumah and ritzui. Then you explained what is tumah is only kedei bia, meaning obviously that means you're excluding that you don't need to have the ritzui because bia means the whole act. What are you excluding when you're saying kedei bia? You're obviously excluding only ritzui, that you don't have to qualify in that amount of time of ritzui. Then it says what is bia is hara to exclude. You don't even have to have the amount of time it takes to do the whole act of bia. So then by default we know that obviously the reason why we're saying kedei bia was only to exclude the ritzui, because kedei tumah is gemar bia and the ritzui, and the hara that's after that is qualifying and saying, well, I'm excluding, I don't have to have even the gemar bia, and therefore you have to say all of them to let you know that you don't need to have the ritzui, and you don't have to have the whole bia. All you have to have is the amount of time it takes to actually do the initial contact. Now, that is where we have this machlekes of all these 8 different opinions. And how long is when the belt is off already, and the appeasement was already done out of the room, and I don't have to qualify, I just have to qualify the amount of time it takes to have a general contact. How much? That's where the first opinion says is kedei hakafas dekel, the amount of time it takes to go around the palm tree. Now Rashi says, wait, but don't ask. Wait a second. If you anyway is at the end of the day going to tell me the measurement is the amount of time it takes to go around the palm tree, so just say how much the shiur of stira is kedei hakafas dekel. You're telling me if it would have said just kedei toma, or would have said kedei bia, or kedei hara, I would have thought this, I would have thought that. Yeah, but Lamas at the end of the day, you're telling me what the shiur is. Amount of time we go around the palm tree. So there's nothing to get confused there anymore. Says Rashi, no, because the Tana had to explain the Isra of Stira, what it's from. Is it because of Gemara Bia or because of Ra? And therefore you have to tell me, Kedei Tama, Kedei Bia, like we explained. But yeah, Lamaisa, he's telling you Lamasa, but you want to know the source of that, and therefore you have to say the whole thing. Okay, but the Gemara says, this seems to be contradicting from the following Brisa. The Brisa says, it says in the Pasuk, Benistara, if she's secluded, and meaning what we're going to do right now is, we had 8 different opinions in our first brisa about what's the shiur of hara. We're going to ask a brisa that is going to flip everything upside down, because it's going to quote the same man amrim with different shiurim, and it's going to mess everything up trying to figure out what does everyone really hold.
Maybe it's the same shiur.
Oh, that's going to be some of the terutzim. So the Gemara says, it says in the pasuk v'nistra, she's secluded. It says the brisa of kama shiur stira, how much is the measurement of, how much time is that? So the brisa says, Loishma, we didn't hear, but Kishuim, when the pasuk says v'hi nitma, it says v'nistra v'nitma. She's secluded and she becomes tamei. Have I kedei tuma? So the pasuk is telling you the shiur of stira is a matter of time of tuma, which is kedei bia, the amount of time of doing the bia, which is kedei hara, which is shebara. Okay, that's everything like we had in the first brisa. But this we're going to get a little bit trippy because we're going to quote the same mandamim with different shiurim. The first mandamim says kedei chazaras dekel, which the Gemara assumes right now that means the hakafas dekel, meaning going around the palm tree, like we said, chazaras dekel. That's the Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Shloimy, he says, it's kedei mezigas hakais, the amount of time it takes to dilute a cup of wine. Ben Azam, he says, and these are all going to sound similar, but the problem is, in the first brisa, if you're paying attention, these were different man amrim, and it's going to get complicated as Rashi is going to sub-complicate it regarding to how to translate the resolution. So Ben Azai, so Bishu says it's time of diluting the cup. Ben Azai says the amount it takes to drink the cup. Kivam says the amount of time it takes to roast an egg. Pidum says the amount of time it takes to swallow the egg. Okay, so here we go. Says the Gemara. The assumption was that when it says Hainu Hakafas Dekel in the first brisa about the amount of time it takes to go around the palm tree, it's Hainu Chazaras Dekel. This is what the second brisa is saying, that to go around the palm tree. The problem is Hasam in the first brisa it was Amr Bishmol Kedei Hakafas Dekel. Rabbi Shmuel, as we have over here, he was the first Tana who said the time it takes to circle around a palm tree by foot. The problem is Upal Rabbi Eliezer Aleha. In the first brisa, Rabbi Eliezer said his own opinion, which means he disagrees, and he said something else. He said Kedei Mezigas Hakais, and Hocham Rabbi Eliezer Kedei Chazaras Dekel. And here in the second brisa, he's saying this shiur of going around the palm tree. So, but obviously it's not the same shiur as Hakafas Dekel, because in the first brisa he says a different opinion. Obviously it's something else. So how do we resolve that contradiction? So Rabbi says, no, actually, hakafa and chazara, although it sounds like the same thing, hakafas dekel, chazaras dekel, actually mean two different things. Hakafa of the first brayso of Rabbi Shmuel actually means beregel, to go around by foot. Chazara, that Rabbi Eliezer is saying here in the second brayso, is beruach, is actually that the wind is pushing the branches and it comes back to its place. So chazaras dekel means the amount of time it takes for the branch to come back to its place. That's the shiur. So that's not a contradiction that Rabbi Eliezer is saying something different than, meaning that he's saying this, what sounded like the same thing as Rabbi Shmuel, but he disagrees in the first place. It's not the same thing, it's something else. So, by Rav Ashi, but first Rav Ashi has the following question. Chazar beruach, when you're saying that it's the amount of time the branch comes back with the wind, is it kihechad the azal v'had the asi? Is it that it's the amount of time it takes for the branch to be blown out and then come back? Maybe it's kihechad the azal v'asi v'had the koi beduchte. Meaning it's not enough just for the branch to be blown forward and back. has to also come back to its place, meaning, like Rashi explained, has to actually stop shaking. So, like, something for like an extra second is like shaking. What's the shiur? Is it just coming back, or is it coming back to its place? So it's going to take it, let it stand. It's not clear what the exact shiur is. Okay, fine. The problem is you're not done with this question yet. You explained why Rabbi Eliezer, who disagrees with Rabbi Shmuel, in the first brisa, but in the second brisa he seems to be saying the same shiur. We said no, it's not the same shiur. Because Hakafar Zekel is not the same thing as Chazar Zekel. But you still have another question, Rabbi Eliezer, because Hassam over in the first brisa, Rabbi Eliezer says, what was the shiur? It's kedei mezig zakais. It's the amount of time to take a cup with water. Yet Hachir in the second brisa, what's he saying? Is kedei Chazar Zekel. Is the amount of time that it takes for a branch to come back. Says the Gemara, like we heard before, yes, it's not a stira. The amount of time it takes to dilute a cup of water is the amount of time it takes for a branch to blow out and blow back to its place. Okay. Question Tana number 3. Hassam in the first brisa, Rabbi Shloimy says, it's the amount of time it takes to drink a cup of wine. Yet Hachav here in the second brisa, he says, it's the amount of time it takes to dilute a cup of wine. So Amos says, the Gemara is kedei limzig velishtois. He actually means the amount of time it takes to dilute and to drink. Because when he said in the first brisa, kedei l'shtoisai, he was going on the previous Tana's opinion. Who was right before Rabbi Shua? Who was Tana number 2? It was Rabbi Eliezer. What did Rabbi Eliezer say? He said, kedei mezigas hakois. On that of mixing is what Rabbi Shua says, wait, and to drink. Rabbi Shua is adding on and he's saying that it's drinking that you need to do with the diluting. And in this second brisa, when he says kedei lamazgai, he means diluting and drinking. What do you mean? Why is he only saying diluting? So Rashi explains, because stam maziga, when you dilute it, you're drinking right away. Because right after you mix the wine with the water, it actually gets ruined very quickly if you wait. So when he's saying kedei lamazgai, it obviously means to drink it. So it's actually both. It's lamazgai and l'shtaisa. So he must say, wait a second. Why do you have to give me such an answer, which is probably bothering you also? But then why don't you just say like we gave for the previous question? Why don't you say id vidichad shiruhu? Why don't you say that mixing and drinking is the same shiur? Says Imam, no. You would run into a problem if you would say that. Because in Cain, Haini Rabbi Eliezer. You just told me what's Rabbi Eliezer's opinion that we said in the first brisa. He says it's the amount of time mixing a cup. Yet Rabbi Shua disagrees in that first brisa, and he says kedei l'shtaisai. And in the second brisa, Rabbi Eliezer says the amount of time it takes a branch to come back, and we explained that that's the amount of time of kedei meziga. Now, if the meziga that Rabbi Shua says after him means without drinking, well, it's the same thing as Rabbi Eliezer. So you can't say that meziga means and shtia is the same thing, because then he's the same thing as Rabbi Eliezer. What's he disagreeing with him? It's the same shiur. So if we have to say, yes, it doesn't mean that it's the same thing. It's actually both together. What Rabbi Shua is saying is the shiur of stira. Another question asked the Gemara. Next Tana number 4. Hasam Amar ben Azai. In the first brisa, Ben Azai says, how much does stira is kedei l'sabei, the amount of time it takes to roast an egg? Yet Hacha Amar, in the second brisa, what does he say? It says kedei l'shtaisai, the amount of time it takes to drink a cup of wine. Says Gemara, no problem. They're both the same shiur. And Rashi addressed it, says, wait a second. Why don't you ask if that's the case? That's Rabbi Yeshua. Because in the first brisa, Rabbi Yeshua said, kedei l'shtais hakais, to drink a cup. And Ben Azai came after him and said a different shiur of the amount of time it takes to roast an egg, which is the kedei shtia. Says Rashi, that's not difficult, because we just explained before. Rabbi Yeshua's kedei l'shtais is not just to drink, it's limzig v'lishtais. And that Ben Azai is telling you, no, it's the amount of time to roast the egg, which is only the shiur of how much it takes to drink, and not to mix and to drink. Okay, next Tana number 5. Hasan Rabbi Kiva kedei l'gaman. The first brisa says it's the amount of time it takes to swallow an egg. Yet Hachamei says kedei litzlis beya. Here it says the amount of time it takes to roast an egg. So Amos says the Gemara, it's both. Kedei litzlis beya v'l'gama. It's the amount of time it takes to roast an egg and to swallow it. In other words, in the first brisa when Rabbi Kiva says to swallow it, it's going on again the previous Tana, Ben Azai's interpretation. Ben Azai says the amount of time it takes to roast, and that is adding on, and he's saying, no, not just to roast, but also to swallow that roasted egg. And the second brisa, when he says the amount of time it takes to roast an egg, he means to roast and to swallow, because like Rashi says, generally when you roast an egg, you're swallowing it right away, right after that, because you want to swallow it hot, that it doesn't cool off. So that's how he's saying that when he says in the second one, roasting, it means to roast and to swallow. Says, well, why do you have to say that? Why don't you say Belema id vidichad shiur? Why don't you just say that roasting and swallowing are the same shiur, like you said for the other Tanoim's questions? Says Im Kain, no, you run into a problem. Hainu Ben Azai, because Ben Azai already said to roast, And then if Rabbi Kiva's legama is to roast, then what's he disagreeing with Ben Azai? Therefore, it has to mean that he's saying to roast and to swallow. Next Tana. So we said Hasam Amr B'Yud Ben B'Seira. In the first brisa, Rabbi Yud Ben B'Seira said, it's the amount of time of swallowing 3 eggs one after another. Here he says it's the amount of time of swallowing an egg. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Kiva Kama. He was actually going according to he was answering to Rabbi Kiva. The Kama Rabbi Kiva had said Mishachen B'Tzli B'Gemiyah, as we just explained. Rabbi Kiva, when he says to swallow, he meant that you have to roast and to swallow. So on that he was telling him, according to you, that you're evaluating the amount of time it takes to roast and to swallow. I could give you a measurement of only swallowing. I mean, don't make it so complicated, Rabbi Kiva, that you have to know how to roast and you have to know how to swallow. No, I could tell you your shiur in only swallowing terms. Which is the amount of time of swallowing through eggs one after another. That's the same thing as the amount of time of roasting and swallowing of one egg. So therefore, it's not a contradiction in himself. He was just telling it to Rabbi Kiva for Rabbi Kiva's own opinion. Next, Manda Amar, we said in the first brayso, Rabbi Elazar ben Yirmiyah says, it's the amount of time it takes for a weaver to tie a thread. So Rav Ashi wants to know, the merachik are the two tips of the threads that are separate, that you're tying together. Are they far from each other, that it takes time to bring them close? Or are they right near each other? So how much time are we saying, oh, you did stira, but they walked into a room in the closet for 1 second, oh, you did stira, oh, let's look at the clock. Was it 4 seconds or 5 seconds? How far? So he's going to take a letter, it's not clear, is it the merachik or the makar? So to Chanim ben Pinchas, he said, yes, to take, we're talking about takeaway. Yes, so there you have. Right, so takeaway is different, like halachas, how we qualify takeaway. If we go to Chumrah, it depends where. But yeah, we go to Chumrah, we'd say, okay, we got to go with the most stringent shiur, But the Gemara itself doesn't resolve the question. Now, so to the next opinion, Chanan ben Pinchas, he says, it says the amount of time it takes for the woman to remove a splinter from her mouth. So there's something stuck inside, her toothpick is stuck, she has to put her finger in to take it out. That's how long it takes for when the belt is open to start the act of intimacy to qualify for the shiur stira. Now, Vashi has the question, the mahadik, is the splinter very tight between the teeth? Or it's not tight. It's just there's something, you have that thing that's really stuck and you got to pull it out. So is it tight or loose? Says you're going to take a look. It's not clear regarding that. Now here we get really sophisticated. We're going to have a lot of questions on this last one. He said, it's the amount of time it takes a woman to stick her hand into a basket, little kicker to take a loaf of bread. So Vashi has the following questions. Hold on, we have a bunch of questions. The mahadik, is it that the loaf of bread is pushed inside the basket? It's tightly wedged, or is not tightly wedged in? That's question number one. Question number two, is it an old basket? When you have something old, it gets very smooth. It's worn out. So it's very easy to get something out of it more than the new basket, because a new basket, you have the threads, you have the chips that are sticking out from the weaving from the tip. So is it new basket or an old basket? Which it would be smoother if it was an old one. Question number three, is this loaf of bread, is it hot? Which what happens is if it's warm, it slips from the hand, and you have to take it out slowly, and it takes a little bit longer to take it out. Or is it cold? If it's cold, it's very easy to get the loaf out of the basket. Yeah, whatever it is, that's what we're qualifying this shiur stira. Or as we continue to Beis, next question, is it wheat bread or is it barley bread? Because wheat bread is smoother, and it slips out more than barley. Barley bread is you could take out quicker than wheat bread. Moreover, last question is, berechicha. Are we talking about where the dough is like a soft dough, which slips out more than a hard dough, like bakusha, or is it hard dough? You could grab onto it and take it out. Take a look. It's not clear regarding all these questions how to qualify this shiur of sticking your hand into the basket to take out a loaf of bread. Now, Amr Yitzchak Bar Yosef, Amr Yechanan, he tells us what we were wondering all along, which we had said, Kol echad ve'echad, every one of these tanoim, ba'at meshir. He evaluated by himself how long did it take for him to start his act of bia, which we said is the shiur of hara. However long that is, that's how he qualified the shiur of stira. Now says, well, wait a second. One of the tanoim was Va'ika ben Azai. Now ben Azai, we know Delay Nasav, he never got married. Like the Gemara says, he says the famous words of I can't be with a wife. I want to learn all day. And the world could be, you could have children from other people in the world. So he wasn't married. So how could you say Mishar by himself? So the Gemara has three answers. If you could say Nasav Pirashav. He actually got married, and actually was to keep his daughter, and he got divorced because he couldn't be married to anyone. If you could say Merabish Mili. Actually, yeah, he didn't ever have a Ma'aseh himself to know, but he heard from his teacher. His Rebbe said, and he repeated that over. But if you can say a third pshat, a pasuk until Sotah Daf. The secret of Hashem he gives to those who fear, meaning Hashem tells him through divine inspiration how long does it take to commit an act of bia, even though he never had one himself in his life. Now, parenthetical, because we brought a pasuk by Playmai, which we said is the amount of time it takes for a woman to stick her hand into a basket to take a bread. He brought a pasuk kibar isha zayna at kikar lechem, which associates a isha zayna with kikar lechem. So that would be like, the amount of time it takes to get the bread. That's how long it takes to commit znus. So based on, therefore, since we brought in that pasuk, we want to introduce some related teachings. Dosh of Avira. Zim namal l'shmei derabami. Sometimes he would say Obenei Rabami. Zim namal l'shmei derabasi. Sometimes he would say Obenei Ravasi. Kol oichel lechem lo yidin til zidam. Whoever eats bread without washing their hands first, as if he cohabited with a woman that's a harlot, with a zayna. Why? Shema says a pasuk. Because of the woman that's a harlot, ad kikalechem, up until a loaf of bread. So like Rashi explains, we're dashing the pasuk from the end back to the beginning. Meaning, because a loaf of bread, a person's going to be chayiv in the punishment, like as if he had a relationship with a woman that's a zayna. Which actually Taisus Shantz here on the side says, the reason why we're comparing not washing till he's down to Isha Zayin is because when someone eats without washing his hands, it's like a chil of hefka, like a shayget. So you mevashlich the hand, right? So that's the same thing with a Zayna. The reason why someone wants a Zayin is because it's hefka. With a wife, you have to go and you have to prepare and you have to and you have a relationship, blah, blah, blah. Until Sidaim, it's the same thing like having a Maisa's nuz, and therefore they're compared. But Rabbi doesn't like this drasha of Rav Avira. He says, wait a second, that's not what the pasuk is saying. Hi, ba'ad isha zoynat kika lechem. This pasuk, the way it's read, it doesn't darshan what you're saying. Ba'ad kika lechem ad isha zoyn mebaylei, as Rashi explains. It sounds like that if you said ba'ad kika lechem, look at the words of the pasuk. It says ba'ad isha zoyn, because of a woman that's a harlot, ad kika lechem, up until a loaf of bread. The way you want to say it should have said ba'ad kika lechem, because of the loaf of bread, ad isha zayna, goes all the way, the punishment, all the way up until, like as if you had a relation with a woman that's a zayna. Which Rashi says, the question is not the order. Had it written ad isha zayna ba'ad kika lechem, Rava wouldn't be bothered with that at all. Because of course you could darshan psukim from Sefer, from the back to the beginning. The problem is the word ad and ba'ad is what bothers him. Because by the loaf of bread, it should have written ba'ad. Because of the loaf of bread, and by the isha zayna, it should have said the word ad. All the way, it's like as if you had this nose with the isha zayna. So El Rabbi says a different drasha. Kalabal isha zayna, to the contrary, it's ba'ad isha zayna. Whoever has an act of being with a woman that's a zayna, l'seif mavakish kikalachem. It's ad kikalachem, meaning he's going to have to be begging for bread, for a loaf of bread from other people. A related discussion of Natil Zidayim, once we introduced it, Amr B'Zeik Amr B'Laz, says, Kal Mazalzim Natil Zidayim, whoever is disgraceful with the halacha of Natilas Yadayim, meaning that he always eats without washing his hands first, Nekem in the Olam, he gets uprooted from the world. Which way Rashi translated is because he's violating the words of the Chachamim. It says Chayv Misa, like it says, that whoever breaches the wall will be bitten by the snake. And if you recall, whenever I usually say, as Rashi explains, I'm usually saying because Taisa usually says something different. So you're going to get uprooted from the world. Now Amar P'chi Barashi Amar Rab, he says, Maim Rishayim, the first word is meaning that you have before you eat the meal, meaning what we call Natil Zidayim. When you wash your hands, you have to lift up your hands, meaning the fingertips have to be lifted up, lamala, going upwards, because we want the water to pour down towards your arms, as the Gemara is going to shortly explain. Whereas my machreinim, the last waters, which Rashi later on, that he says that, meaning after the meal, which Chacham obligated you because there's a salt from Sedoim that could be in the food, that if a person would put in his eyes could blind him. When you're washing the hands after the meal, you actually have to lower your hands downwards because we actually want the filth from the food to come off his hands because it's to get rid of the filth. So therefore, Mayim Rishayim, lift up the hands. Mayim Rishayim, lift down, put the hands down. Similarly, we learn in the Brayso, Notel Yadav, if someone washes his hands, he has to lift up his hands upwards. Because why do you have to lift it up? So here's where we explain it. What's going to happen is maybe the water is going to go beyond the joint of the wrist, and if your hands are not going upwards, if you're putting them down, it's going to come back into the hands. It's going to come back. It's going to make the hands tummy. What's this? So Rashi explains a little bit detail. The Mishnah teaches in Mesechus Yadayim that you have to wash the waters on the hands 2 times. Like we know, we wash the hand 2 times. The first one purifies the hand. The second one purifies the water that's still wet on his hands, which became tummy from his hands. As the Mishnah teaches over there, the hands are metame and matar up until the wrist. In other words, from the wrist and below, that's where the Rabbanan made a gezerah that your hands are considered sheni l'tumah, and it invalidates truma, and that's what gets purified with the washing up until the wrist, which up until the wrist has to be washed. Now, what happens is if you wash the hands the first time and then the second time till the wrist, let's say it goes beyond the wrist, and then goes back on the hand, so that's gonna be tar because you already purified. The second waters already purified the first waters. But if you wash your hands only one time, out beyond the wrist, and the second ones you only did till the wrist, so that means to say the water that went beyond the wrist was never purified from the second waters. If those waters come back onto the hand, it's going to be with time in the hands, because those waters that went out, the second ones, you weren't particular to take it as far as the first ones went, therefore those waters were never purified, they're going to come back to the hands and be tamid because they became tamid from the hands. And the second one's never purified because they never went beyond the wrist. That's why we say you have to lift up your fingertips going upwards, because maybe the Mayim Rishayim went out, and if you put your hands down, the water's going to come back, which those are tamid waters, and they're going to be tamid the yadayim. So if you have to leave it up, don't put it down, because if you leave it up, it's only flowing down the wrist. But if you put it down, guess what happens? If the Mayim Shneim only went till here, and the Mayim Rishayim went down over here, the Mayim Rishayim, which are tummy waters, are going to come back onto your hand. So leave them up, you dry your hands, so it never comes back down. That's the halacha of Mayim Rishayim that has to be Yegbiyas Yadayim. Now, related discussion regarding, again, this halacha of Netilas Yadayim. So Amar Bavo says, Kol Eichel possibly Nigabidayim. Whoever eats bread without drying their hands. So that's actually considered as repulsive, and it's actually considered as if he ate tummy bread. Why? It says a pasuk in Yecheskel. Hashem says, this is how the Jewish people should eat their bread. Tamei v'goimer, which there the pasuk is talking about, as some Rashis add on the girsa, they should eat it begoyim amongst the nations, and they should see, because Hashem commanded Yecheskel that they should eat their food in a disgusting way. They should bake their breads in the animal dung and the human feces, like it says there in Yecheskel, which they had to mamish make their food disgusting. And afterwards it says, this is how the Jewish people should eat their bread, tamei bagoyim. So like Rashi explains, so you see that something disgusting is called tamei. So therefore, if you're eating disgusting because your hands are wet and you're eating, it makes it fashimmelt, it makes it disgusting. It's like as if you ate tummy breads. So a part of the halachas of Netilas Yadayim is actually to dry your hands, not because of any tumah be'etzim, but it's like tummy because it's disgusting. Now the Gemara asks, going back to that pasuk we mentioned before, the end of the pasuk we had mentioned ki ba'ad isha zayne, we said because of a woman that's a harlot, ad kika lechem abatul, a loaf of bread. Now the pasuk there ends off, and the Gemara asks, "Umay, what does it mean when it says in the pasuk ve'eshes ish, and the married woman nefesh yikara titzah?" It's a little technical how to darshan this, but a married woman, a precious soul will capture, will trap. So what does this mean? This is the following agadic teaching: any person that's arrogant, which basically means that his spirit inside is expanded, is exaggerated. That person is going to stumble with an act of adultery with a married woman. Why? This is the pasuk. Shema says in the pasuk, "Ve'eshes ish," and the married woman, nefesh yikara tatzud, a precious soul will trap. So, like Rashi explains, the pasuk is saying like this: "Ba'ad isha zayna," because of a woman zayna ad kikar lechem, meaning, and then it says, "Ve'eshes ish," who's a zayna, Nefesh hayikara, which means like this gavoya, this expanded person, this arrogant person, that she's going to be titzudena, she is going to trap him, meaning she's going to be trapped by him, because he's going to run after her and he's going to get her. So that's Eishes Ish, Nefesh Yikara Tatzid. This precious person, Tatzid, is going to trap her. He's going to get her. So you see, Gaiva is going to bring to Znus. But Amar Rabbi doesn't like this drasha. He says, Hi Nefesh Yikara, why is it calling Yikara? It's not precious soul. Nefesh Gavai Mibayle. Should say, Gavus is always the terminology of height. The person is trying to make himself arrogant. It's not term Yikara is not appropriate. Void, moreover, he Tatzud Mibayle. Meaning, the way he's reading the pasuk, he's saying that since you're explaining to me the pasuk that's going from backwards to the beginning, so it should have written the Eishes Ish, and a married woman, Nefesh Yikara, a precious soul, he Tatzud, that she traps, meaning the wording now sounds like that the married woman traps him. That's how it sounds like. But the way you're telling me is that he gets her. But the pasuk sounds like she's getting him. So that's the technical point that he doesn't like. He tatzud mi boile. The way you're saying is that he is the nefesh yikara tatzud. It will trap her. But the pasuk sounds like that she's trapping him. That's his problem with the reading. Tell him Rabbi, because of these two questions, he says a different drasha. He says kalabal esha says is teaching you that whoever has relations with a married woman, even if he learns Torah, which says regarding Torah, pasuk Mishli, Yikara mipninim, it's more precious than pearls. So you see the pasuk of Nefesh Yikara, the person who learns Torah, because it's Yikara mipninim. Now, what does it mean? It's more precious than pearls. So pninim could also be read Mikan Golda Shenichtis Lefnai V'Lefnim. The one who learns Torah is more precious than the high priest who goes into the holies of holies once a year. Meaning, because the halacha is that even a mamzer, if he's a Talmid Chacham, comes before a kohen who's an Amma Aretz, which he opens up first, and he makes the first bracha, as the Gemara learns out in Hari Step Yigimel and Aleph. Even so, the pasuk is teaching you, if you have a nefesh yikara, he, the married woman, titzudeno, yeah, it's her trapping him, not him trapping her. It's not talking about, he's going to be mezana. It's he titzudeno l'din shel Gehenna. She's going to trap him for the judgment of Gehenna. Meaning, even though he's a nefesh yikara, he's a Talmid Chacham, he's more yikara mipninim, he's going to pay the price. She's going to trap him when it comes to the day of judgment. Guess who's coming to prosecute you? Is that Zaina who's coming along. Now, but continue on this theme about Gaiva. He says, anyone who has this arrogance, it's as if he worships idolatry. Why? It says over here, that it's an abomination of Hashem, all those who are arrogant of the heart. Says there, pasuk in the don't bring this abomination to your house, which refers to Avodah Zarah. So you see that arrogance is like Avodah Zarah. Of course, there's a lot to darshan over here in all these Agadic teachings, but it's like a person worships himself. He's a Bal Gaiva. He's like doing Avodah Zarah. He says, someone who's arrogant, it's as if he denies the primary principle of God. Shlomo says in the pasuk in the V'cham, it says that your heart will be heightened, which means you'll be full of yourself. You're going to forget Hashem, your God. So it's like as if I'm continuing as if you're forgetting God. When you're when you're arrogant, it's like you forget that there's even a God who runs the world. He says, someone who's arrogant is as if he had relations with all forbidden relationships. Why? It's abomination of Hashem, all those who are arrogant of the heart. Because all these abominations, etc., which is over there by the Pasha Barayas. So you see that it says the same word to Avas. It's like as if you commit all the Arayas if a person has gases, if he's a Geval Lev. Ulamai says another thing is Kilabana Bama. It's as if you built a private altar for idolatry. Because Shenem, it says a pasuk in Yeshaya, it says, Chidluchem na'adam, stay away from the man, asher neshama ba'apai, that has the soul in his nostrils, meaning, as Rashi explains, that he considers himself like a Bal Nefesh, which is arrogance, because he's considered, like his soul is considered very chashuv in his own eyes, so his neshama is ba'apai, is in his nostrils. So stay away from him, because what's he considered already? Now, I'll take a bameh, don't read with what is he considered. Elabama, rather read it that it's as if he built a bama. This person has his neshama ba'apoy, this guy who thinks he's so great, is considered as if he built a bama. Now, the Gemara asks, the end of the pasuk that we mentioned before, which is Ta'avas Hashem Kol Gval Lev. It says the abomination of Hashem is all those who are arrogant. The end of the pasuk, which the Gemara asks, is my yad liyad. And what does it mean in the pasuk? Hand to hand, lo yanaka, will not be cleansed. So Ravi says, it's continuing on this theme. Kalaba al eshes ish. Whoever has relations with a married woman, which Tosfos says that should not be the girsa, because the pasuk is not talking about a married woman, it's talking about gasas haruach, like we explained. So rather, Tosfos, Rashi actually said the girsa should be called sheyesh begasas haruach. Whoever has arrogance, so then even if he acquires to God heaven and earth, meaning he praises God in his dominion over everything. Like Avram Avinu, the somebody that says regarding him, I lift up my hands to Hashem, Kel Elyon, the supernal God, Kanish Ma'art, who created heaven and earth. Meaning that's yad liyad. Meaning even though he's similar to Avram, who lifted up his hands, the pasuk is telling you lo yanaka midinish again. He's not going to be cleansed from the judgment of Gehenna, either because of, like our girsa, because he had intimacy with a married woman, or like Rashi says it should say, because he was arrogant. But the problem is, Kashlu l'debei Rabbi Shila, that this drasha of Rav was difficult to the yeshiva of Rabbi Shila because, hay yad liyad lo yanaka, why is the pasuk saying hand to hand is not going to be cleansed? Yadei mebayile, it should say the hands, because that's what it says. Avram's hands, it's not hand to hand. Avram's hands were going up to Hashem. So it just say the hands. So rather, El Amar Rabbi Shila, they said a different shot. Even if someone received the Torah like Moshe Rabbeinu, who received it from the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to his own hands, the Torah, like it says in Devar, Miminoi from his right, was Eshtas Lam, it was a fiery law of faith to him. Even though it went from hand to hand, Lo Yanakam Medina Shal Gehenna, he's not going to be cleansed from the judgment of Gehenna. But that was still Kashal Rabbi Yechon. Rabbi Yechon found that interpretation also difficult. Because Hay Yad Liyad, it's not hand to hand. Yad Miyad Mibayle. Hand from hand, meaning the pasuk is talking about the receiver, not the giver. It's talking about Moshe Rabbeinu who received the Torah. It should have said Yad Miyad, that even though you're like a hand who received from another hand the Torah, even so, you're not going to be cleansed. So Rabbi Yechon says the final pshat is a continuing tab of Hayamad Aleph. Afila Oisid Staka B'Seiser. Even if someone does charity discreetly, which is he's giving from his hand to the hand of the pauper, and that's what it means. Yad Liyad means the hand who gives to the other hand. The Chesed says the pasuk Mishlei Mat Meseser, which is such a great thing. Giving a gift discreetly, Chafa Afa Gaimer, it overturns anger, etc. Which Rashi says that it's not like this pasuk has anything to do with the pasuk we mentioned before. It's just saying the added chiddush that even though giving tzedakah b'seiser is such a great thing that it overturns fury and God's anger, it's still not going to atone for gasas haruach. He's not going to be cleansed from the judgment of Gehenna. We obviously see how bad arrogance is, that a person considers all these terrible things when he thinks that he has to inflate his ego to think he has to be who he needs to be. Thank you to Anytime for hosting us.